the components for the Milwaukee 8 fuel injection system by Daytona Twin-Tech. Plug and play ECU, auto-tune wideband controller, wideband sensors, USB interface. Also requires a laptop PC. It is straightforward to install the Milwaukee 8 ECU. Place the factory ECU after removing the panel. Remove the seat and install the wideband control unit. The ground goes to the battery or a really good chassis ground. Next, there's two black connectors on the right-hand side. This wiring runs down the right-hand side of the bike. And the first connector plugs into the original oxygen sensor placement. Looks like this. I already disconnected it just for easy. It's done. This is the connector that's used to reprogram the Milwaukee 8 ECU. That needs to be away from the exhaust. The second wire goes down, follows the chassis, and then it also plugs into the original O2 sensor plug. It's also black, it's just the longer one. After that's done or complete, then you want to go ahead and install the wideband O2 sensors. If it already has 18mm bungs, you're in good shape. If not, you're going to have to open up the original size. The rear O2 sensor on this particular one's right here. This is the connection for it. The front one is always marked with yellow tape, and it's also the longer piece. And this is where the front O2 sensor is on this particular motorcycle. The rear O2 sensor, would probably get a shot over here. There it is. And after that, you read the ECU and follow the instructions and go from there. So once you have everything installed on the motorcycle, you're going to want to go to daytona-twintech.com, find the download section, and download the software. Here's the latest drivers. You'd want to download this. You'd also want to download the how-to guide or read it. Other things that you're going to need to get is the original software install, which is right here. And then you're going to want to get the Milwaukee 8 update, which is right here. Now you have to make sure you trust it, so you have to tell it to keep it. Keep anyway. Now to download it. And then we want to get the config update to be able to understand how the config files work. Again, same thing. Keep. Now all these files are downloaded. We're going to want to go into the folder where they're saved. And let's start with the latest software installation. I'm going to go ahead and repair it because it's already installed. You got to click yes. It's going to install all the files. Once these files are installed, then you have to run the update for the Milwaukee 8, which is this executable right here. There's where it goes. Click extract. Yes. We're going to replace yes to all. And then at that point, you could look at the config files. This config file is now only used for the logging, and this is all the information that you would need to know to adjust your logging file. It's not very difficult, but we'll save that for later. This is the driver setup. I already have the drivers installed. You can run that too if you want to. I'm not actually going to do it, but at this point, now the software is installed. Turn the motorcycle on is the next step. We're going to run this TZFI launcher. What this launcher does is it allows you to choose the tuning software or the diagnostic software. So we're going to turn the motorcycle on. It's on. We're going to choose the tuning software. Now, of course, the motorcycle is plugged into the USB. The USB is plugged into the PC. Do you want to auto connect to the ECU? Yes. Found it. You want to read the tune? Yes, because we do not have the tune. This window goes away It just gives you some identifying information for what kind of hardware is in the motorcycle. It takes about 40 seconds to read the tune. Once it's read, we need to go ahead and save it, and then we'll go through the 3 steps that are required for any brand new installation. And those steps are going to be, you've got to program the VIN number, the odometer, and the ETC calibration. The thing about the odometer is you do not want to set that number higher than what it actually is, or else you're going to have an issue. So right now when you're done, it says upload complete. We're going to turn it off. The reason why we want to turn it off is because the motorcycle takes a little while for all the CAN messages to shut down. So we turn it off for a few seconds after the write, let everything sync back up, and then we power it back on. In here is where you would adjust your base pulse width. Everything in the motorcycle is based around this number. This is some theoretical numbers. This number right here that's the highest pulse width you could have at this RPM. If you wanted to change your injector size, you can do it in the tune. So like, let's say you originally had 10 grams per second and you're going to go to 12. You can click recalculate, bam, that changes this, and that gives you the base pulse width factor, so that way you can use that in your main fuel table. But right now we're going to not do that. We're going to put this back to the way it was, or I could just hit cancel. That wouldn't save it. So go back to basic parameters. It's at 22. If you have a bike that has cooling fans like the Ultras and the Touring, you click enable twin cool parameters. You can adjust those. And at this point, we're going to turn the motorcycle back on, and we're going to do the first step, which is adjust the VIN. This is the actual correct VIN of the motorcycle. If I change this and this is wrong, it'll say VIN error on the motorcycle. It automatically converts it to uppercase for you. You just have to type in the correct VIN. When you're done, you can just click OK, verify the new VIN. It's going to program the VIN. It's going to come back to tell you the same message to recycle the ECU. Next thing you want to do is set the odometer setting. Give you a little bit of information here. The new value must be slightly greater than the ECU value. So you take the actual speedometer reading and convert it to kilometers. If your speedometer is in miles, you multiply it by 1.609, enter the result, and there you go. This bike actually has got 2,050 miles on it. So I'm going to take 2,050 times 1.609, and that's the number I'm going to put in there, 3299. And then it programs the odometer. The third thing you do, again, 1, 2, 3, the third thing you do is calibrate the ETC system. This little screen comes up, you click start test, and now you're going to wait. The ETC motor itself is going to go through a series of tests. It takes about a minute and a half for this to complete, and then you've got to do some couple other steps yourself with the throttle to calibrate it. You'll know when this test is complete when right around here it pops up and says it's ramping to 0, and then you're going to get another window that pops up. This data here is good to store somewhere. Maybe take a picture of it, because if the new data that it learns is wildly different than that, then you can assume that there's something up with this routine, and you'd want to call us, or you want to try to run it again. So we're still waiting. It's doing its tests on the ETC motor. It's ramping to 0. We're almost done now. This is the end result. What's the most important thing is that these two signals basically meet here. So step 2 says firmly rotate the twist grip fully clockwise. Basically, this is roll off. So I'm going to hold it, and then while I'm holding it, I'm going to click OK. And at that point, it gets a value, and that's an appropriate value. And now we're going to rotate it to the wide open throttle position quickly, and then gently return it to basically where it normally is with your hand off of the throttle. With your hand off of the throttle, click OK. And now we're going to rotate it to the wide open throttle position. I'm going to count to 5. 4, 5. I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to hit OK. And here's our new values. So these are okay. The previous values that it had were learned from another ECU from another motorcycle, so this is perfectly okay. We'll go upload. Now we're going to hit exit, and we're back to the tune itself. We can turn the motorcycle off at this point. It's a good idea to leave it on a charger. These bikes, because of the lights and everything that's on, they really suck battery. So at this point, we haven't saved our file, but we're going to do that. I'm going to click File, Save File As, and we're just going to call it. It's going to save it, show you where it's saved. I'm just going to call it 0 M8FI 2-bar turbo read. And so now, if we close the software and say we reopen it again, we'll run this launcher here. When we reopen it again, I don't want to auto connect to the ECU. I want to open a save tune file. So now it's going to show you basically the last files that you had open. This is the full name of the file. If you don't want to do that, you can also do it another way. You can click File. We'll just do Open File. It's fine. So this is the file that we originally read, or we could read it back in again. At this point, these are the files that have been read in and saved. So basic parameters are here. These are kind of basic parameters that are single values. They're called scalars. More advanced parameters are here. The important things to change here would be, let's say you've got an issue below 2,000 with acceleration pump getting into it. This is a good value to increase or decrease. This is another one. This really works on the gain, the extra fuel that's added. And then here's some other interesting values. This one, the higher you set this value, the additional fuel it gives a turbo bike under boost. So right now, it basically gives 1.5%. That's that number 1.015 per PSI. So if I wanted to do 2.5%, then I would set that to 2, and that would, or excuse me, it would be 3.5%. So the next step would move this to 1.03. This is the maximum allowed spark retard. This is the highest number of spark it can be pulled out of it. This is the total amount of spark that can be pulled out at 200 degrees. This is where the ramp goes, is from 120 to 200 degrees. At 120, it basically is at 0. 80 degrees is the difference. So at 60 degrees, it'll be at 1, and 200 degrees, it'll be 2. This is the amount of spark retard that's pulled out based on the low range. For the engine temperature, low range is from 180 to 220. So at 220 degrees, it's pulling 1 degree. And then from 220 to 320 degrees, it's pulling up to another 5. But remember, it's clipped by this 4 degrees here. The way we used to set the maximum learned VLMs was right here with max and min. This has gone away now. It now has moved into a table, so you can set it based on throttle position and RPM. Pretty cool stuff. So if we made a change, you click OK. Otherwise, you can click Cancel. These are all the tables, and a table is something that has both an X and a Y axis, meaning it's not a one-row table. One-row tables are functions, and so an example is like this accelerator pump function, which starts out right here. This is where you're not changing the throttle, and as you ramp the throttle in, it adds more fuel. As the throttle comes out, it pulls throttle out. A table is going to be like an ignition advance table, which is right here, which is looking up based on map KPA. So right here would be about 16 pounds of boost, and at 16 pounds of boost and 3,000 RPM, it's commanding 3 degrees. Now, what gets added to that would be the timing retards based on air temperature and based on engine temperature. So that would adjust that slightly. If we don't want to save any changes, we put close table without changing. Main fuel table is here. Main fuel, this is an alpha N, so what that means is that it's looked up based on throttle position. And so, because this is a turbo bike, at about, as you can see, see how this is right here, at say 5% throttle and idle, let's call it 11% of 22 is the pulse width. And then as you ramp in, it goes up substantially. And that's because this bike will make 7 pounds of boost at about 35% throttle because the turbos are that efficient. This is our commanded air fuel table. I'm not going to save this. So what this means is these are the values that are commanded when let me kind of adjust that a little bit better for you. When the bike is in closed loop, which means everything's all heated up. So this is what it's trying to target. And this is in lambda. So this would be like 14.4 times 0.78 would be your air fuel. You can also change this, that way it shows an air fuel. So if you think you need more fuel and you want to target it, this is where you adjust it at. This is the correction table. So this bike has been ridden quite a bit, and this is all that it's learned, which is not very much. A few little 5% here and there tip in. We could apply it, we would not apply it, but front and rear, same thing. It's only learned a few percent. It's not really enough to really worry about applying. If you had ridden the bike and you want to apply it, you literally would say apply front and rear values. It's going to put all these back to 100s. And then if we go to look at the main fuel table, this would be adjusted slightly based on that, and also the front fuel table would be adjusted. This is fairly normal for a bike like this to have these two tables. The front table tweaks the main table, and the main table is for the rear injector. Another thing that's kind of new is this maximum BLM fuel adjustment. This used to be only 2 values. And so now we can go in here and we can actually tell it, oh, at idle, I want it to learn plus or minus 10%. At cruise, I'm giving it 14 to 18%. At wide open throttle, we're giving it 7% plus or minus to learn. So you can change that. Also, in the front and rear tables here, there's some other special values like 1. 1 means that it goes in the closed loop, but it doesn't actually do any learning. So that means it can just learn the plus or minus 10%, but it does not save those values in here. I tend to do that at these low RPM, low throttle ranges because the overlap of the cam is so bad that the learning is constantly chasing itself. So another thing you can do, you can set all these to 0. So if you set, say, this whole thing and right-clicked on it, excuse me, do modify, and we set the whole thing to 0, what that would do is that would say that it never has any learning at all there. If you make a mistake, don't worry about it. You can click close table without saving. You want to save it, we're going to say no. If we go back and look at it, it doesn't remember it. This is another way to apply the BLMs, which was learned here. I applied it in the table. You can apply it out here. You can do the individual ones, just the front only, just the rear only, or you could choose to just reset these BLM correction tables without applying anything. So let's say we open up this tune. No, it's all right, but we'll do it. Yeah, so we'll open up the tune again. Nothing's been saved, and if we go back and look at what it had learned a few percentage points, we could go in here and we could reset this, and that would only reset these tables to plus 100%. So in this case, I want to do that because if I upload this back in the bike, I really don't want the 2, 3, 4% of learning. Functions, this is how you adjust and add fuel multiplier, priming fuel, cranking fuel. Priming is as the engine's spun around before it actually cranks. This is how much fuel it primes, how much it gives it. This is generally set fairly high. Cranking fuel, this is the amount of pulse width, literally physically pulse width based on temperature for the first second or so when it cranks. This is a time-based global start enrichment function. So it's time-based and engine temperature-based. So this shows you the time, which is time in seconds. And you can see where it first starts up, it's 40%, and then after, say, 100 seconds, it's down to 10%. So it multiplies that number times this number, if it happens to be in the cell, to equal how much extra fuel is being added. If you notice here, I started adding fuel again above 230 degrees. I do this because the bike's now in closed loop here, and this 12% times 10% of it, which equals 1.2%, that gets multiplied against this number. And so now when it's that hot, it's going to add 1.2% of this. So, or meaning subtract 1.2%. So that's going to go from, say, 0.78 to 0.76. And so that's a nice little richening up as the bike gets warm. This other cold start enrichment, these are based on time and also temperature, but this does not affect the target air fuel. This is a global adder. And so if we look at these particular tables, we've got time and our percentage. So after say 67 seconds, we're down to 60%. And then if we look at the front and rear cylinder, that 60% gets multiplied against here. So above 147 degrees, we're not adding much fuel until it gets way hot. There's also a global fuel enrichment versus intake air temperature. So as the intake air temperature, if it's colder, we're adding fuel. As it gets hotter, we're adding just a touch more fuel. And this is fuel that's added to the base pulse width. This global fuel enrichment versus baro, I do not recommend that you adjust this. This does not work quite as advertised, so stay away from this function. Fuel injection compensation versus battery voltage. So you could play with this. This basically adds additional fuel as the battery voltage drops. The other couple of things you have is this is the idle RPM based on engine temperature. So as you see, it starts up, and let's say it's cold, it's about 1200. Then as it warms up, it goes to 1000, 949, and then as it heats back up again, I've got the idle coming up just a touch. Now you would use that's what's commanded, and then it uses this IEC position table, and it uses the start adder table to further adjust and tweak these numbers. Now, if you look at the data logging will reflect these numbers, and there's also a third one in here, which is this number. this nominal idle step. So all these get added together to get you your commanded idle air control number for when it's starting up. So I'm going to reload the same file back in. So I'm going to just reopen the file that we originally read. I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to turn the motorcycle on. I'm going to hit program. Instead of reading the ECU, I'm going to program the ECU. It takes about 75 seconds, 80 seconds to program the ECU. That includes the verify. If you want to do a separate verify after the programming's finished, now is when you want to do it. You don't want to use the verify at some point in the future. The reason why is because the ECU is always learning and it's always updating the data logging. So the data logging is running all the time. You don't have to start it. It's always on. And it's a first in, first out, which means for an hour of runtime, it's recording the data and storing it into flash. And so after this programming session is done, those timers are going to increment. And so if you try to then do a verify at some point in the near future, the verify will fail. I only have the verify there right now just for my own use, but I left the menu there. The verify flash is last. And the reason why the verify flash is last is because we program flash, we program EEPROM, and then we verify both of them. Right now, if you happen to disconnect or bump something, it would be, the ECU will be stuck in a bootloader mode. And what that means, in order to fix this, is not a big deal. You just have to turn the motorcycle off, completely disconnect the ECU, reconnect the ECU, and then it would work again. So right now it's done. It says remember to power it off. Hit OK. Great. We'll wait a few seconds. What we can do here is now we can also run our logging software now that we've programmed it. And the logging software says you want to auto connect to the ECU. I'm going to power the motorcycle on. I'm going to click yes. Found the TCFI. Great. You want to view the real-time data. And what that means is what the bike's doing right now. I'm going to click yeah, why not? And so what we see here is we see that we've got a map of, it's in inches, 0 to 30, and that's not what we want. The reason why that's not what we want is because this happens to be a 2-bar map sensor, and we need all that information to be correct. So how we're going to fix that is we're going to go into this edit configuration file, and this is the configuration file. So this is not the current one. We're going to leave this open, and then we're going to go back over to our, where we save this config file, and we're going to grab this 2-bar config file. We're just going to open it. We can select everything from it, or we can just go down to the bottom right here. This is the 2-bar. This is the important stuff. Is right. If we copied from here to there, Control C to copy it, and then we go back to the original file, and if we replace this from here, I'm going to hit delete, and I'm going to hit Control V to replace it. What this does is this now puts this information here on how the configuration works. So right now the only thing that's commented out is map 2-bar true. If you read this, it tells you what to do. It's pretty easy. We're going to save this. We're going to close all this out. And now, unfortunately, to make the software work, we have to restart it. So we restart it. Auto connect, yes. View real-time data, yes. There we go. Now our map goes to 2-bar territory. We can crank the motorcycle. Now we're using this in this real-time logging. Here's where the idle air control, if we turn this on, the motorcycle on, where this would add up to those values. So we're going to exit the real-time view, and now I want to just look at the data of what happened in the last few seconds as we started the bike. So I'm going to turn the bike back on, and I'm going to go to this view, download log data. So live data view is here, or we can view download data. We're going to go to download data and view chart. This is going to download the data that's always being recorded. And we can do last 150 seconds, which is defaulted, last 12 minutes, 24 minutes, up to 60 minutes, 300 seconds, or 90 seconds. I only want the last 90 seconds because I want this read to be quick. And at this point, it's going to pull up the data log for the last 90 seconds. You can see where this is RPM in red. So we can zoom in. And right here is where, for say 10 seconds or so, there's no RPM. And then it cranks, and there we go. Here's our throttle position. This is what our throttle grip was doing. Here's what the maps sensor's doing. It's about 105 kPa. Vehicle speed versus RPM. Engine temperature right now, it says the engine temperature is 91 degrees. We just cranked it for the first time. From here, we can save the data log if we want to. And we'll just call it test. And you put a comment if you want to. We remind you to save the data log. I'm not going to. Now, if you want to reopen the last one, what you just were looking at, just click on it, it's reopen. Or we can open up a save data log. You just open up the software. That's where you would do it. There's our data log. Or let's say this bike has been running for a while. We want to look at some, statistics from the bike. This is going to read like how long the bike has been running, average RPM, things like that. So this shows that there was a couple of cylinder faults, things like this, because I'm playing with the software of the bike. These are fairly normal. Abnormal resets are normal. Cylinder faults, that happens on occasion. If it happens, the bike runs bad when you crank it. All you've got to do to fix it is to turn it back off for about 30 seconds. This is the maximum engine RPM. It's revved right now, 3,700. So, special features. This let's say we clear the statistics data. Actually, that's not the one. But here we go. Clear historical data. And now everything's cleared. This is what you'd want to do after you have the bike up and running, because now we'll look at it again. And those codes should be gone. If you have codes while the motorcycle is running, they're all cleared. If you have codes while the motorcycle is running, if you go to live data view, they'll actually show right here. If you're looking at the last data chart, when you're scrolling through it, see, like right here is where I had an ETC issue. As I was testing, it shows the diagnostic code right there. That's pretty much it for this. If we go back, and we'll close this, if we go back to the main tuning software, something that's new that I forgot to tell you about. So let's go from the place where you'll know. Let's start from the tuning software. We can auto connect to the ECU because we have the bike on. No, we're not going to read it. We're going to open a save tune. And this is the last tune. So something that's new is that all of the config units and what used to have to be done with the config file is now done via this configure units and program options. So this now gets programmed into the ECU. It gets saved into the file. And then if you read it in the future, all these values update. So you don't have to remember how to set up your vehicle or your ECU software to work with your tune. that's really about it. If you had to do something with the port setup, you would do it in here. This is where you would scan. So like right now, if we just hit scan, it'll find where the port is, help, things like that. So that's a quick overview of how the software gets installed and you use it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.